Hey, good morning, folks. Welcome to the second edition of Awesome Conference. This conference is brought to you by a group of designers and developers who just got together and decided to experiment with this format. Today is the second day of the event, and we'll be focusing on a design track. We also have a code of conduct. Please visit this link, which is mentioned right here. And if you see if anyone is violating this code of conduct, please feel free to report it on this link. And we have 50 plus viewers with us right now. Folks, if you want to donate to our COVID relief fund, there's a link which is, so there's a UPI address, you can donate. And also, I'm really excited to introduce you to the next panel. We'll be talking about the changing landscape of design. So I'll be seeing you folks in 2 minutes. So let's get started. Hey, good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Hi.
All right, I'll just, so first, thanks for joining us for the second edition of Awesome Conference. And for our audience, this is the first panel of the day. Yeah. And my name is Rahul, and I'm currently working as a UX designer with Myntra. And I'll be hosting this panel with these awesome folks. So just a quick brief about how this panel is going to go. We have 60 minutes, hard stop at 12. So for first 45 minutes, we'll be talking about the topic, like how the landscape of design is changing. And we'll slowly move towards like how the nature of work has evolved for designers over this last decade. And then we'll be taking questions from our audience in last 15 minutes. So right now, I believe we have more than 50 plus viewers. I hope the numbers will increase in the next few minutes. I think we're a little early for a Sunday morning. So folks, whoever is watching this, you can ask your questions on our YouTube channel. And also there's a Slido link which will be shared right below, right here. It vanished, please. Yeah. So, and we'll be also sharing this link on YouTube. Please keep an eye on it. And we're also streaming it on Periscope on Twitter. So see you folks also there too. So good morning, folks. I'd like to introduce our panelist to the audience. So I'll get started with Madhuri. Hey, so
Hi, Rahul.
Yeah. So she's the co-founder of Experience Design School, and she's also running an awesome podcast channel called Hire Worthy. So the website is mentioned here. Please take a look at it. Next up is Samir.
Hello.
Samir has been a designer for more than 15 years, and he has been currently heading both design and customer experience at Scriptbox. And next is King Sidharth, who needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyways. So he's also the most senior member of AwesomeConf community. So he's currently managing both product and design at Headout. And he's also creating lots of content about design and what designers do in day-to-day life on his Instagram and YouTube channel. So if you want to look at it, just search King Sidharth on this both platform, and you'll see like lots of awesome content about it. Also, he has promised. So he has also promised that he'll be roasting Anirudh after this event. So please keep an eye on it.
During the event.
Like you have a hard stop. So I'm really happy to host all of you, and thanks for making time on a Sunday morning. So since we have a hard stop at 12, so let's get started. And we're talking about a serious topic, so we'll try to keep it lighthearted as much as possible. So I'd like to talk about the context and the historical factor of what design was like when you folks started your career, and what are some expectations from you as a designer. So for example, Samir, with your situation, like when you started, like sure. It was, I think, during the dot-com bubble burst around like early 2000, and you have also gone through that 2008 the housing market crash.
Yeah,
and the scenario was very different from then to now. So I think it will be really good to paint a picture for audience, like how things were, and then we gradually move to talk about how this future is going to look like, and what are the expectations from designers, and we'll dig deep more into it. So Samir, the floor is for you. So we'd like to know, like, how did you get into design, and what design was like back in the days?
Sure. So yeah, like you said, I started around the year 2000, Y2K as we like to remember it from that time. And I actually, when I was studying, I wanted to get into gaming. And when I was done with my studies, I couldn't find any good gaming company like the kind of games that I used to play locally. So I said, okay, what's the other thing? And while I was in college, we were already using the internet. Though through like a terminal, like a Unix prompt and things like that. It wasn't as graphic, or at least we didn't have access to it at the time. But it was still the most exciting thing that I could find in the digital landscape. And that's kind of how I got started into working with a company that built custom online shopping sites for various boutique brands. Just like you see now, or until now, large funded companies acquire others the same way our little studio got acquired by a very well-funded .com. So yeah, I wouldn't call it accident. It was quite intentional. I was quite interested in the space and such. At the time, it was called web design. Me and all my peers were web designers. There was no term called UX, though it's kind of what we did, but we still, that's kind of what it was called. And slowly, then things started graduating into more sophisticated terms. Started looking at information architecture. At the time, the closest academic thing was human-computer interaction. So me and some of my peers started studying that and understanding what are the theories and principles that we can apply to make our design better. I think I'll end with one kind of unique kind of anecdote from the time. We learned about heuristic evaluation and usability testing, and there was one internal tool where the company that I was working with, where me and a colleague of mine, we did an evaluation of that tool, and then took it to the product manager. I mean, there was no one was called product manager at the time, but whoever was doing that product management role at the time, we took it to him and said, hey, this is what we evaluated your tool professionally using the best of design principles. This is what you think. And like the guy was so disheartened, he had put his life and soul into it, into making that, and he was really proud of it. And that's where we understood that, okay, as much as we have empathy for the users, we should have empathy for the developers also. And how do you go about making them understand and making them realize certain things at the same time that you're evaluating the tool. So we learned a lot of things in just by doing them this way. And the rest is history.
Oh, amazing. So, what about you, Sidharth and Madhuri? Like, how did you got into it? Did you like plan for it? Like, did you know that you'll be a designer going forward, or it just happened?
I mean, I just got started with startups back, like if we go kind of 10 years back in 2008. That was the time I was just starting with startups, just starting freelancing, kind of dropped out of college at the worst possible time. And then, not that college was going to do much for me anyway. There's an arts college, fine arts college. So the fine arts degree is worth nothing in real life. People go like, yeah, paint my school, come to school kids, school campus, paint the wall, go back home, you get some money. But what I remember, like it was all about hustle. Like you had to provide real value, real relationship, and I still remember the friends and relationships, even professional ones I made back then, were even like they still survive. Tides of time. We are still friends with most of it, and it's just very human to during these times to sort of reach out and create genuine relationships because everyone is suffering together, one way or the other, right? It's not easy for anyone. And that sort of I remember, like from the just starting out the career, and just to quickly brief up, like at that time I started with coding, and the kind of situation sort of like forced me to pick up multiple skill sets. And I'm kind of glad because that's where I discovered design. It wasn't obvious early on that design will become so interesting to me. When I just started out, it was as design was equally interesting as programming was equally interesting as startups was equally interesting as blogging. But over time, yeah, for sure, like design overtook my life, and kind of glad for that. And kind of like during that formative time of like 2008 bust is when that started happening.
Wow. So, Madhuri, your turn.
Yeah. I actually started out as a multimedia student. My degree was a multimedia degree,
Mm-hmm.
and I did illustration. I was selling illustrations before even I got out of college, actually. And I felt, okay, this would be interesting. But then I met my mentor, and everything changed. Like, I usually say that, it's before and after, literally, because I basically learned a better definition of design. And for me, I understood that I was well suited for this over a period of time. It's not like I understood it day one. And then from there, I worked with a lot of, as a consultant, I was working with Ogma, and Ogma I had the exposure of working with Amazon, Philips, all the big design teams, like, the super big design
Mm-hmm.
systems, and they were all set in stone. But you kind of learn to, pick up from there. And I enjoyed the process of coming here, and now at this point, I'm considering product management and other things. And like Siddharth said, right, you will pick up multiple skills on the way. It's not going to be just like, oh, I'm sitting at UI 24/7. It's never going to be that way, and that is exactly how my journey has been. And picking up new skills every single time has actually made me fall in love with design more, because that's the core of how you approach things, and I cannot change that part of me anymore now. So it's like a permanent brain damage, and I'm very happy for to have that. Yeah.
So, I really like the part where you mentioned like you met your mentor and things have changed. So, there's a before and after.
Yes.
So, so that might not be the scenario with like most of the folks. So,
Yeah.
some people struggle really hard to find direction or guidance in life.
Hmm.
And I particularly struggled with this a lot because I started with something very different. Then I took few odd jobs, and then I got into design. So
Hmm.
the like road was a little different, but it worked out. Do you think that scenario has changed for the new generation of designer? Do you think we have enough content or enough institutes or enough degrees or courses for these folks?
There is enough information out there. I mean, if you know the right things to do, like for example, you can go to Google and you can search saying how to build a UI, how to build a,
Mm-hmm.
you will get a lot of tools out there. But the biggest thing that's missing is something that will connect all of that core principle that basically informs you on how to build these aspects, right? So, like we are working in the field right now, and we all know that when we actually start building on something, we know that we have to get a sign off, we have to work with our stakeholders, we have to ensure that 100 other people will be informed at the same time your design is actually meeting the business needs. and that education is kind of missing in the current field right now. And I feel when we are basing our education only on these aspects, it will be very hard for that person to break those ideas and come into the industry, because they're going to do a lot of relearning, and it'll be disheartening for them because they're just going to go through these simple things and they're going to forget that there's a bigger picture. And even though I had my mentor, I did go through that because I was reading articles in Medium because I felt inadequate that I was not learning. I didn't have a traditional design education like others. Though I did multimedia, it was not really very relevant to what I was doing, right? And I felt a lot of FOMO of missing out. I used to read and try to apply. It would never work out. Like, we know how many articles have we read and we're like, oh shit, this doesn't work out really. And so that's kind of the way. And I would say, just take it with a pinch of salt. Don't take everything that you read online completely directly. And it's like, try, it never works, right? When you take the, like, just take this analogy, for example. You get a cake box that basically says just add some eggs and water and you're done, and put it in the oven. Does it really work out that way? You have to kind of like experiment a bit. Maybe you have to put a temperature change, maybe one egg lesser than what it is normal. So these are the changes that I would ask that person to coming newly into the industry to be ready with. Otherwise, you're going to spend more time unlearning and you will not be able to catch up with others. So don't waste that time. That's the only thing I would suggest. Yeah.
So you folks want to add anything to it?
Yeah, I mean, content-wise, for sure, we have tons and tons of content. If you think there's lack of content there, by the time we are done with this, there'll be 2 more YouTube channels launched, I'm pretty sure. Uh, so there's no lack of content, right? And that has never been the case. Like, even back in the day, content was there. It was just really slow to download, right, over a slow connection. So if you wanted a lynda.com tutorial for your next favorite app, you had to kind of find the torrent, set the download at night, and if you were lucky, somebody was paying for it, then you would again like set the download at night and then hopefully download one chapter by the morning. And that's how you kind of like manage through that. But again, like, it was never about information. Information was always out there, like Madhuri said. It becomes more about, especially during these times, it becomes more about the nuances of like collaboration. How well can you communicate a value? How fast can you move? How well, how good a decision maker you are. What kind of bets are you willing to take on yourself, on others? And it just comes down to those sort of elements, especially during these times, rather than sort of knowledge and content, which there's ample of, and there'll be more of, for sure.
Samir?
No, these are all great points. Yeah.
So I'll jump to the next question. So this is for all of you. So when you talk about design education or learning design, like the new designers mostly focused on learning softwares or design principles, and this is also being taught in all new design schools. So you're playing different roles as designers at your respective organizations. So what did you recommend to learn as a designer, given the context of like moving from past to present, and if there's a commonality between present to tomorrow, what should they focus on?
So maybe you want to
Sure,
start?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So, see, we often say that good products come from a balance of design, technology, and business, right? And you'd want to have equal stakeholders of these 3 areas. I think for me, one of the things that has helped is a general interest in the business ecosystem around the product that I was building, curiosity about the technical possibilities and constraints. This has always helped me, and it continues to help me immensely. It helps me collaborate with my peers in the business and technology side when I can understand that so I remember this quote from Jason Fried, who's the founder of 37 Signals. Is that easy is a word you use to describe someone else's job. And I remember hearing that, like, I watched him, give this talk live on stage in 2008, and that has stayed with me since then. And it's really true that you cannot say that someone else's job is easy. Oh, it's just one more element to add there. And the same thing, understanding that that the business or product that you're using needs to make money. It is there for a commercial reason. and how does that impact? How do your design decisions impact that, right? So yes, while we are the torch bearers and flag bearers of everything that's great for the user, I think we have to be able to balance all of these three things and work with our peers. This is one angle. I think the other one has also been providing value to your organization, to your team, going beyond your role. What does it take to get it done, right? So I've worked in currently from a fintech startup to back in the day with the likes of Oracle and Cisco, and no matter where you are, no matter what level of resources or constraints that you have, being able to add that value, transfer your communication and organizational skills to whatever the work that needs to be done, right? We all have transferable skills to other things that happen around us, right? And especially when you work for a smaller company, you know that you have multiple roles to play. No one can just say, I'm going to specialize in just this one thing and not do anything else. And that's where all of these skills start becoming important. So I'll again end with an anecdote from back in the day, right? So when this 2002 1 to 2.com bubble burst, my so-called well-funded company in a very fancy office in Mumbai went from 180 to 70 in one day, and 22 within a couple of weeks after that. And we were all, a couple of us ended up in a basement, all within the span of 8 months to a year. I managed to be a part of that small 22 member team as much as I was a part of that 180 member team. Not to say that those who didn't make it weren't worthy enough, but there was some kind of value that I probably provided, which helped the founder make that decision that, hey, this person needs to be here and help us take take this gig further, right? So as that 22 member team lasted for more than a year and a half, even in the worst of times, we were able to grow. So there is something which lets you grow, there is something which lets you survive, and you'll have to figure out for yourself what that balance is, and double down on that. So yeah.
Wow, that was very well put. So, Sidharth, what is your take on it? Like,
I completely agree. Like one said, like it's this big factor of luck during these times. So it's important not to take it personally. And you could be in really good position just right now, and things evolve in a way that doesn't remain the case a week later. So that's quite a possibility. That is what people mean by uncertain times. That you don't know how things are evolving, what second, third order or spillover effects as we study them start to like take over and really take over a life of their own, which is also why people talk about this being an interesting time to start a startup or start a company or to start honing your skill, to be very honest, because now value for consumer or for your employer is really important, right? You better either you wear like multiple hats, or you go deeper to solve the problem, or you make it more efficient to solve the problem, or you make it cheaper to solve the problem. Any of these things, right? These become more critical. And that is the best time to kind of hone your skill set as well. So completely agree with Samir on that that's the way to go forward. And the only thing I would like probably add there is just remember that there's a luck factor playing out these days as well. And it's really not all your fault. And be easy on yourself. All of us, like none of us know actually how it may play out. Even here, when we're discussing in this format, we are just taking our best guesses forward, right? It's not like either of us are experts on, living through crises or times like these. But we have drawn some parallels. We hope to like be able to share some of these insights and see, ideas from you as well on how things may evolve. So yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I 100% agree with Samir and Siddharth, because that's a luck, and of course, showing value will always help you out. And sometimes, even if you show value, it wouldn't really work out because probably the conditions change or your product is no longer relevant. So you have to take your bets accordingly, right? Like you have to know what bet to take and what bet to give away, because sometimes you can't keep having the thought process that, hey, this is a bet I've taken, so I'm going to stay with this as long as possible. You can't keep taking that. You have to ensure you can be smart about what you're doing, and you can say that, okay, this has not worked out. I have given it a time box of 6 months. It's not working, so let me proceed to the next one. And it's okay, because life is a series of bets, and you're just going to say that, okay, this worked, this didn't work, and that's how you learn experimental design in any events. So if you can do it there, you can do it in work as well. So for me, that distinction is something that if you can bring into your life as a skill, and I myself am learning, and so that has aptly put, we are not experts either. We are just learning and we are sharing our experiences so that you yourselves can pick up these skills on the way. So that's my thing.
Wow, amazing. So before we jump into the next question, I have a gentle reminder for our audience. Feel free to ask your questions on our YouTube chat. Or also, there's a Slido link. Should be here in some time. Yes. So please ask your questions there. We'll be taking the questions in the last 15 minutes. So this was amazing. This insight you have shared was amazing. So let's jump into the next question. You folks got into this career at a different time, and specifically, I remember like when I started around this 2000 after this 2008 housing market crash. So we suddenly saw this rise of sharing economy, and we saw this orgs like Uber, Airbnb, right now in India, Ola, Swiggy, everything came into the picture. The startup economy and ecosystem had grown. And also the way we look into users, that might have changed. So what are your thoughts on it? Like, has the design practice has been affected by this change in economy?
I think it's just starting to get
So,
affected to be.
Sri,
Yeah.
Am I on mute?
yeah, you're audible.
Okay.
No, you're
So I
audible
think
now.
I think there's going to be like so we're just starting to see the changes that are going to impact, and there are a bunch of interesting trends. I mean, obviously, like social, sharing economy started back then, Airbnb started back then, ride sharing started back then, and now if you look at this, sort of pandemic, it has forced us to go the opposite way of don't share spaces and kind of like put us in isolated places. And if you listen to a bunch of thinkers, psychologists, and professors in psychology talking about these topics, some of them even mention that we are in a perpetual state of grieving at the moment. There's a sense of loss, right? Because either there's a sense of loss of freedom or job or not being able to meet the people you care about, and it's happening across society, and it has profound effects on the way people make decisions, people behave. Going forward, like I think at least for me, there are going to be two interesting observations that I'm looking forward to. One is that people are going to rely on observational evidence to pick up social cues. And we do a lot of social cue learning, right? Early on, I remember in February when I started wearing masks in airports, etc., you would get stares from one or people, right? But usually, like when now you wear masks, like if you're not wearing masks, like you're within like a couple of months, we've changed to that. So people are gonna like look at other people's social cues of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and that's going to be slightly at a distance. So imagine like earlier on you onboarding another your friend on an app and teaching them how to use this app in a close vicinity is not going to be an option, right? So the QR code sense of usage may drop down, or you may need to print it bigger. Like tons of things will change, and the biggest impact is going to be this seeing and doing reflecting behavior. And second that I'm looking forward to is information asymmetry is going to be a big problem. People like imagine the same pandemic without Twitter, without internet. When information reaches is very slow. Like I was calling my mother back in Punjab just when Wuhan stuff was happening, just in January, telling her, okay, this is developing, it may come here, we have to be mentally prepared. And little did we know, like it'll come down to this. So information asymmetry will become very, very important, and kind of a responsibility of designers as well. That how do you dispense that information? It's not just casually about writing words. Some wrong information written wrongly can give you anxiety, can really put, or even in certain cases, put health at the risk. Would love to know what other folks
Yeah.
hear about think.
Yeah, I actually agree with what you've said, Sidharth. Like the 2 points are very important. Like one is the behavior shift, and there's going to be a very interesting pattern that I've observed is earlier developed countries used to have this loneliness as a factor. Like if you actually look at the research reports from the countries, they would consider loneliness as one of their population, how status, right? The single, are you married, and these kind of things, and they would even see how many lonely people are there. But given we have so many technology and these kind of things, it's going to be a similar thing even in underdeveloped countries or developing countries like us, like as they say. So GDP is no longer a factor that countries would actually measure us on, because they would be like, okay, now we see the flaws of every single country out there. Like a country that has the most well available healthcare infrastructure like US is crumbling, and in same with Europe and other places. And now there's no difference in how countries are handling. So it's only the systems that are actually saving the countries. So if you actually look at so just taking COVID example, Taiwan versus Singapore versus US, right? You can actually see the number of infections based on how the system has handled these things, right? And information is, you can see statistics very differently also. I myself am learning statistics, so I'm not such a big thing. I don't know much about it, but what I understand is statistics can be twisted this way or that way. So you need to cut through that, and you need to actually understand how do you actually see this. You can twist it and say, hey, this is so awesome, this is everything is green, or you can twist the same thing and say nothing is going well. So it's a perspective. So you have to be ready, you have to cut through all this, and you have to sharpen your perception so that you can be ready for no matter the onslaught of information. I was just telling my friend that you wouldn't feel the effects of pandemic so much if you didn't have Twitter or Facebook or WhatsApp. You wouldn't feel it so much. It happened in Wuhan. Now we've been freaking out on Twitter because we know that somebody from China is tweeting about it. Otherwise, we had no clue, right? Until it would actually hit our shores. Like imagine Africa had Ebola and nobody really cared about it because it was Africa. Not saying that Africa is not this thing, but the point is the communication is low there. But because it's in US and countries where they tweet more, the geography is kind of affecting us. So we have to be aware on what's actually scaring us out, what's not scaring us out, that those kind of things, and the input that we give in. So economy drives everything, sharing economy. Now we're going from unsharing economy, and now maybe car sales will come back. Who knows? We don't know. I, I'm a millennial who rents everything out, including her water
House
filter.
sales in remote places.
Yeah, exactly. Like now we can work from anywhere. Wi-Fi sales, definitely. So those are factors we could consider. Yeah. So that's what how I'm seeing as the effect of things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Samir, I'll ask you this, like from a leader's perspective, do you think remote work, which you're embracing right now, it will be a
Yeah.
new norm? Will it things change things going ahead?
I think definitely it will have an impact. There have been organizations which were much more strict about having everybody. They couldn't imagine that having a productive discussion can happen if everyone is not there in front of the whiteboard, and such. So all of those things will change. I think larger organizations that have been distributed have been working like this for a while. Like I personally, I didn't find it all that new. In Oracle, I've worked in teams which are in 5 different locations. We couldn't even find a common clock time where we could have a meeting. So that level of distribution also has been there. So we always had to find a different way that, okay, if I can't meet you face to face ever, then how am I going to collaborate with you? Or collaborating with people across in many different locations. So now with people in the same time zone, at least that is one level of simplicity. But the other extreme has been there are companies like Zapier, Buffer, who have always been remote. Basecamp, 37 Signals, they are remote. And if you see some of the things that they say that, okay, we don't ever have to know where you are, as long as you're doing your work. I never have to really have so much of meeting time with you. But at the same time, we have to balance it out and say that that personal connection, those water cooler conversations, those things are also there, which spark a lot of new things, new discussions, and just friendly banter outside of meetings. All of these things takes its toll. I think we'll find out. I think we'll be that a generation of workers who's going to find out a whole. Imagine this as a large scale, like a worldwide social experiment, right? Like you'll find out that the things now, people are already complaining about sleeplessness at nights and anxiety and burnout because of so many meetings. How do you balance that with real human connection? Because you need both, right? So I think remote work will get easier. So tomorrow, for companies that were not really that much into working from home, once we get back to whatever the new normal is, if you said that, hey, I want to work from home, I don't think there'll be that much of a eyebrow raising happening in those companies. Tech, I think, has fairly easily taken it up. Some people have suffered a little bit, but more or less at the broad level, it hasn't been that much of a thing there. So yeah.
Do you
Yeah, I
folks
mean,
want to add anything to it?
very quickly, I don't think it's gonna, like, there are people who don't get it, like, and they're gonna try to go back to the default, the old normal as soon as they can. But I think thankfully the market will change drastically when
Yes.
engineers, designers, and bunch of creative folks have tons of options of companies joining companies who believe in remote and have changed to remote first. It will become extremely hard for businesses who do not adopt remote as well as an additional option, an equal option of having an on-site. There's some people who prefer on-site, your families, etc. Not everyone can do remote, but there are people who prefer remote, and but companies will have to balance and give both options. Otherwise, they'll miss out on talent, even big way, than ever before.
I think Siddharth, it would be more like the money is going to drive everything. What you optimize is what is going to happen, right? It's not going to be about, hey, I'm willing to be remote.
Right,
No,
right,
if the
right.
company wants to make more money, the first thing they're going to cut is the people. Because if you look at the BMC, the biggest factor of cost is actually people, not even the assets. And even land is there
Yeah,
comparatively an
yeah.
asset compared to people, right? So you might be seeing more remote workers, but not, as you said, right? Not every field is going to take it up. Yeah, could be that way.
So speaking of cost cutting and reducing manpower at work, so this brings to my next question. Like, what do you think will be the role of automation when it comes to design? Do you think automation will enable anyone to be a designer? So that you can take this up.
I think it has already enabled. We have been reducing redundancy from design work since the longest time. We're creating rounded corners in Photoshop is a big deal now. You just like throw gradient to create rounded corners. Like you keep automating, and that's what we humans do with technology. We take the mundane of our work, optimize it to a point where computer does it better or faster, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if we come to a day where Figma goes like, okay, here's your starting kit, now modify this, give us your data to modify this, give us various factors to test it out. So I completely expect AI to take over even more, so of, like we saw automatic generation of like characters, then they'll start automatically animating. Now there's automatic transcription of videos, you can add subtitles. So more and more of this redundant work will continue to move to automation, and more decision making will be part of designers. More multi faceted thinking that requires you to think of higher order effects, which AI cannot imagine, is going to be more important. So the UI screen, let's say in tomorrow's autonomous cars, and the software which drives it was probably designed and tested, and the 50 shades of gray and red were tested by the AI. But definitely, the policy decision making of how to inform the user that something is about to happen, how to handle after cases after an accident, or how to handle various kind of situation will require a lot of human decision making, a lot of empathy. So that becomes more critical. So anyone who's hiding behind the curtains of like churning out the same work day in day out, making ad banners, making mock-ups, like more and more of that will get automated away for sure, and people will be hired for decision making.
Yeah, that's true. Like, if you actually look at the World Economic Forum, they released a 2020 skills report and basically saying that these are the 2020 skills that we expect people to be ready with. And the top skills are basically critical problem solving and, things like, for example, creativity, people management. That's a very hard skill, but that is required because you're going to handle people with who have coming with their own sets of ideas, curiosity and inclusion. How will you manage those kind of things? Because we all know that when you come in as a designer, you actually come in with a lot of solutions, different sets that a manager should be able to handle. It's not going to be that hey, I'm the boss, I'm going to tell you. It's not going to be that way anymore. It's going to be a completely different way of management. So those are the things that will be of a higher requirement. And when automation comes in, people are going to be like, hey, I don't require you to do this app. Like, for example, you can actually, I was just helping a friend out make an application less than 2 hours using Google Sheets and a front end tool. And that was so simple for me. I could just break down the problem statement and quickly make up the Google Sheet tool. And that kind of tools, if you could introduce for your organizations, imagine how many experiments you can run and save money. And that way you can show your value back to your organization, that you are a valuable person and resource to contribute back, right? Because you're being employed by them. So they need to see value both ways. So that is something that is already on the way, and the best tool and skill is basically your brain and the problem solving skills. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the where a particular application or whatever you're designing sits within the ecosystem of the user's life. What is the cultural context of that particular application? The design choices that you pick. Say your automation can give you 100 options. The one that you pick to go ahead is has to be one where you have considered what are the ethical and cultural contexts around which this choice that you're making sits. That just a very simple example, but if you think about all the decisions that go into designing a product, whether it is, and when I say designing, including product decisions, including technology decisions, including business decisions, all of these are a very delicate balance. They fall into a service, an entire service that a person experiences over a period of time. And yes, while you can automate the mundane and redundant kind of things, there will always be one layer of really understanding that, how does this affect this person's. So think about the behavioral aspects of it. So even say in my world in fintech, there's a lot of behavioral nudging that we have to do to make sure the user is taking the right decision for them, right? And how do you always evaluate that, okay, this person is taking the right decision or not, and how is it influencing them, and under what is their state of mind under which they are taking that decision, right? Today the market is very volatile. It's going up and down, and people are taking certain decisions by a gut feel. Some of those decisions are the opposite of what might be recommended to you. How do you automate that, right? Maybe you can run it at a massive experiment style, but then what about the strategy around that? Can you visualize someday that there may be a designer role for the person who creates this automation, right? The tools are not going to make themselves, right? So there's some aspect of that also, that are you building, what kind of decision making are you giving what rules are you setting within the automation which help that give you the right choices at the end of it. So yeah,
that was excellent. So we have 15 more minutes. So we'll be taking a few questions from our audience. And the questions have started rolling in. So the first question is really excellent. So it's about how do you measure your own value and employability as a designer? Who wants to take it up?
Khuzema, you want to take it up?
Yeah. So essentially, a lot of it comes from what others also see in you. I remember, some of my very early performance appraisals where my manager wrote up some notes and shared that with me, and he rated me as that I have exceeded expectations. I was like, wow, what have I done? So it sounds good. Let's see what he says. And the things that he wrote, and I was like, this is my job. I'm just doing my job. This is what you hired me to do. But yeah, if you're giving me a raise, I'm not going to say no. But that is, the value that person saw in me. So I think a lot of it should be guided, and that's Madhuri, you talked about a mentor and a coach. That's really important over there also, that you have the right kind of mentors and coach who can see what you are doing, because they are the ones who can zoom out from your work, who can zoom out from your life and look at specific instances and give you feedback and say that, hey, this is something that you did really well. Now, whether you think that was part of your job or you think proud of it, some of that you have to get those cues from others also. So yeah, that should be one measure, that you always have somebody who can look at what you're doing and give you feedback on that.
Mm-hmm.
Sidharth, you want to go first?
No, I mean, I don't have much to add to that, except the fact that don't use one data point or two data point to sort of come down to self-worth or self-value. That could be one of the most damaging things you can do to your psyche at this point. That is why it's important to have those core skill sets, and apart from some skills apart from work, so you can you have some stable grounding for self work. And this is the time I would highly encourage to make a group of friends who can have you can have an honest conversation with, or can have an honest conversation with you. So if they see you not moving in the right direction, they can intervene. Or if you are stuck somewhere where you're unsure, you can reach out to them and always know that they will tell you the truth. So that kind of support system right now will matter a lot, especially in terms of evaluating certain kind of conditions, because none of the conditions in these times are going to be black and white. It's never going to be like this or that. It's always going to be like the nuances in between, and that's where this sort of support system helps. So while evaluating yourself, measuring your own value, it's what we typically do. We do that. We sell more hardcore. We focus more on value, and less on the fluff around, and double down on our strengths, and kind of find people whom we can collaborate with to negate our limitations. And like I said, have a support group. Do not rely on one or two sample points to change your view of your own self.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
That was excellent.
Support group and trying to see the value from others. I've had a lot of time to think about this question, like not just this thing, but I've been thinking about it for quite some time, and then I realized something very important, which is when you're actually trying to figure out what is it that you can give to the world, you can only be what you can give, right? You have to figure out what are the areas that you resonate with the most. Like, think of it like we were just discussing this in office, and think of it like two sets, right? If you are able to give value in design, and design you are able to give, you should be able to map completely. And if there is overlap, then you will be able to give the value that you think you are able to give. If not, you will be two disjoint sets. If you can totally become a bigger set among the subject, then you are completely valuable, and you would be able to give this. And this was the best explanation that I heard, and this is I can't say this is mine, but this explanation, I hope it really helps. And always be on the notice of, actually, if people are reaching out to you and asking questions, right? If you are approachable, people will come and ask you questions on, how can I do this, how can I do that, can you explain this question to me? And that's when you know that, hey, I'm valuable, I can offer this, and people find value in it. And that would also help you out as a pointer, and those are also data sets you could consider apart from just these things. So that would be an indicator for me as well.
Mhm. Excellent. So we'll take up the next question from our audience. So someone has asked, like, how do you balance UX specialization and generalization? So what's your take on it, Samir, Siddharth?
So I think UX and design as a role is very hard to define, both in terms of generalist and specialist. There and UX has both. It has two extremes. Like on the starting end, like most like filled with generalists. It's like the opposite of normal distribution curve. And in middle there are not so many people. And then there's extreme end of extreme specialists. Like they only do pediatric research for those kind of behaviors in UX. Like there's really hyper specific specialist people in UX, specifically speaking, and that will continue to be the trend. Again, like when you enter the field, you will explore many things, and you will continue to sell for the longest time. A combination of things, skill set, until you really develop a name for yourself. But then you can hyper niche, and the reason that you hyper niche is because there are only like 5-10 people in the world that can do that sort of work, and then you can command that sort of price. So that I don't think will change much. But of course, people who are able to do it remotely, people who do not require to meet users, like who are able to invent methodologies which do not require direct intervention or direct observation, but can rely on inferencing or abductive reasoning or just observational reasoning. Those kind of methodologies are going to take over, and those kind of UX researchers or designers are going to take over or become more successful, because you are just able to use less resources and do more. Because if you're able to do that during COVID times, like, and you're able to extend that into non-COVID times and save some money as well. So you can form teams, you can form structures, you can form systems, and what do you call that, operations protocol, where you're able to scale the same research to a bigger audience because of your new methodology that you invented during COVID-19 times. So I think the field will not change much, but it'll become more challenging for sure. It'll become far more challenging, and just offering one set of skill set is not going to be enough.
You folks want to add anything to it?
No, I think well said.
Okay, so
Yeah,
we'll move to the
it's
next
covered all
question.
points.
So this is very interesting. Like we UX designer also look ourselves as storytellers. Like presentation and documentation is a bigger part of our life. So the question is like, how important is storytelling, and how did you develop that skill set?
Madhuri, you want to go
Sure.
first?
I actually, so to be honest, storytelling for me is mostly, I would find it that I've been with a master storyteller. I have seen good stories being said. I've seen good, bad stories being said, both sides, right? And especially when you're a consultant, you have to tell great stories because that's when your whole story gets sold, and that's the job of a consultant, to tell the story so that you can actually get the design going through, because that's also the main job, right? You need to make sure that whatever you have as the idea at the center, the idea at the center is ensuring that the business wants to get these results out. Like, say for example, your product is has to have a certain feature that you find is very pivotal to the product. Maybe your business doesn't see it, maybe your developers don't see it, maybe your designers themselves don't see it. So you have to inspire them using this story by by constructing. So story doesn't mean once upon a time, far far land away. It doesn't mean that way. It also means that you bring in the data. You actually show that this customer went through this whole journey, and we found that at this particular point he probably dropped off, or he probably felt this, he probably lost the trust because we couldn't really offer this. And that kind of clear pain based and or vitamin based storytelling, like saying that, is this working or is this not working? Can we actually reduce the time this person has spent on this app so that he can go ahead and get the work done and move forward? Is that the story that you want to tell? So those are the things that you learn on the way, and you have to pick up some basics of understanding who you're talking to. You cannot tell the same story to an executive versus you can tell the same story to probably your developer. It's not going to work. You have to learn how to speak different languages to different people, and that is the way we speak to our stories, and kind of gain our audience within the organization and outside the organization, and kind of push the agenda forward, not our own selfish agenda, but something that is actually useful for everybody. That idea at the center is very important for storytelling, and both points go together. So Rob, that's my side. Yeah.
Oh, that was really well put. I'll move to the next question, and this is from Ajay. And it's very interesting. Like, so this question to the whole panel is like, do you see any breakthroughs which happened in UX space during the COVID-19 lockdown, which might help the current situation?
For sure, just for picking up on where I left it last, ability to do talk to users and figure out remotely, to source users, to have a ability to have a conversation without being in person, which is much easier for communication cues. That's going to be like a different skill set altogether. Filtering, selecting your sample set is going to be even more critical. To you have to randomize it even properly, or have make sure it's representative of your customer base. Those kind of minor things are gonna amplify. At the same time, I think the nuance of right now people are, I think right now companies, how they're writing COVID-19 copy, UX copy, is like you should see like how careful they are, what is the right thing to say, what is not the right thing. So it should have been the case always, right? So I'm hoping that some of those carefulness, right, that ownership and responsibility and accountability, that boss, if we write something wrong there, that can mean life or death for somebody, is gonna stick around. And because that's the true value of UX, to be really, as a field, honestly speaking, that we can go the extra mile. That's the only definition of that role anyway, right? And coming back, like just adding to the previous one, like we draw rectangles for a living. Like if we didn't tell stories, we'll be out of business very soon.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I think empathy is that what you're talking about, Siddharth, right? The number one, I feel a breakthrough because I've seen and I've been part of one collaborative of who's generating a lot of material for helping people on COVID-19, and that's the one thing that I've seen, that people who are generally used to being commissioned by large corporates and doing very business organization work are now giving their time for these activities, and they have to really look at a set of people for whom they have not worked for, right? So there are parties where there is stigmatization of if you get diagnosed, or if you have to be quarantined. How do you still explain to those people that this is not the case? See, like Madhuri, like you said, right? If you're on Twitter, you know what's going on, all of these things, but not everybody is there. There are a lot of people who are on a different WhatsApp university universe, you may call it, where there is a lot of misinformation sometimes, and there are other things that go on. How do you challenge that, right? I think some of those patterns are coming out. I don't know if it will really come out in 100% as it should, but definitely it is a start. And these same set of people, when they come back to their regular work, the more commercial organization work, you would hope that they bring those skills back, and they retain those skills of having more empathy, and seeing that, okay, there are so many people who are so different from us, who are so different. And then if you really think about it, right, even we living in the cities, we are oversaturated with services. Even as a simple thing, right? Like if I have to order food, I've got 6 apps where I can, I'm so confused about which one to open and order food. And so we hang around with people like us a lot, versus there are sort of people who don't have such choices at all, right? The world is talking about social distancing. In our country, there are places where it is not possible, right? Dharavi in Mumbai, and there are hundreds, thousands of such places where it is not even possible. How do you design a solution for someone if you are preaching social distancing? That is a constraint, and which is open to more possibilities. So yeah.
so I absolutely love the next question we have.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's about the aftermath or impact of COVID. So because of COVID, you're seeing a positive environmental impact. And this question is from Sankat Pathak. And as you have seen, like the Bangalore greenery feels more. Pelicans are back in Mumbai, and we're also seeing less pollution around. So do you think like design-centric companies learning a lesson from this, and they'll make environmental impact as a metric?
Yeah. So in terms of environmental impact, right? So what I've noticed is there are a lot of brands that are relevant during normal times. Like say, for example, Coca-Cola or any of these things. You wouldn't think really Coca-Cola is very important, because you'd be like, it's not a basic thing. It's just a soft drink. That's what you would be looking at it, right? But what happens over a period of time is now you're seeing people buying more sugary drinks because they're kind of stressed inside. They're like, okay, let me buy more stuff, let me eat this. But we don't see this flip side of it is the garbage collection has gone up. Look at it, the number of people consuming these things and the garbage disposal based on these things. Like this is just a small thing, because there are no ships moving around, the logistics have reduced, completely shut down, the oceans are better. But the companies that are dependent on logistics, say they're going to manufacture in China and then they're going to go to US or all over the world, how are they going to actually start looking at developing their skills locally? Can your local plant produce the same quality as it has been done in China? Can they even think about that direction, right? Are they ready to invest that time? And those are the lessons that people need to take away from this kind of situation. Because we are being remote, we can access the world wide web, upskill ourselves sitting at in front of our laptop. But imagine a pharmacy person who is actually sitting and handling the line and trying to manufacture all these things. It is not going to be the same way for him. So is he going to sit and invest in those skills, or is the employers going to sit and invest in those skills so that they can ensure that whoever is being part of this whole chain is going to you know uh, are they going to upskill themselves? Those are the environmental impacts will be reduced once business owner take a decision on, I'm going to be local, I'm going to source locally, I'm going to ensure that the transportation cost comes down to zero. eat local, green local, all these kind of movements, they will rise up and they are going to kind of impact our whole supply chain as well. So whatever you built for the past 10, 15 years, it may become more because people are going to start ordering in more because they don't want to go out and interact with anybody. Or people are going to, just going to build their own farms in the backyard and just going to go to the backyard, just pick up these things and come back. So it could be both ways, right? So we have to be ready for impacts on both of them and see if more humane solutions. Maybe government can come and say, if you want to buy just these soaps, you should probably, it's a ridiculous rule, but you should not buy soaps from which are not manufactured beyond your state. I don't know. Just this is something that you can think of, right? Like you can say that only Bangalore manufactured food should be sold here. Economically, it doesn't work out. Capitalism doesn't work out that way. But is this something that you can even consider as a possible solution? Is what I'm thinking, and this will probably help. I don't know. We need to see.
What do you think, Samir, Sidharth, what do you think about this?
I just sorry I had to drop out and quickly picking up on trying to pick up on where I left off. I wish more companies would pick up that as a important core metric. But I'm afraid in the industries that need it the most, they're still not incentivized enough yet to do that. Think about sanitation workers, think about medical professionals, think about like teachers, psychologists, blue collar workers, your vegetable vendors, your shopkeepers, your delivery boys, like tons of innovation required to help them with their environmental impact and impact of environment on self. I think that is also going to be an important self safety, psychological safety. All these aspects that we do not discuss enough, do not factor them in enough. Like if you hear some of these apps, that are used by delivery boys, the alarm sound is so loud and anxiety inducing. If any of you have heard that, like things, small things like that matter, right? Like we know as UX folks, as designer folks, that they add up into cognitive load. I hope more innovation happens in that front. I really hope that environmental impact becomes a metric, but I'm borderline skeptical that it's not gonna take over as big as it could have. Like still, like people are not serious about that.
Yeah, I also have a kind of a mixed feeling on this. On one side, there is a hope that, okay, anyways, designers have, some designers have been talking about sustainability for quite a bit of time. And I don't think most designers also even understand the sustainability of the choices that they make, right? Some of the design choices that have been made. If you look at the physical products that come, the way shipping and handling happens, we order so much of stuff home. The amount of boxes that it comes in, the amount of plastic packaging that it comes in, all other so many things that happen there. On the other hand, there is human behavior, which there was this case about when seat belts were launched, people actually started driving more rashly. And now that we have seen that, within a month the environment can clean itself up, that's amazing, right? There is something to human behavior. How do you counter that? It's a strong force, which is not very easy to counter. So we've got to figure out what that balance is, and I don't think that there'll be an immediate change to things, but I hope that there will be some strong voices that come forward, and try to change that a little bit. So.
Awesome. So we have two more questions. We are already overshooting by 4 minutes, and we'll try to cover it in next 10 minutes. So next question is from Hardik, and which is on a more of a personal note. So question is like how to create a balance between the design and the development team regarding the technical restriction in a particular design.
Sure. So I can start with that. So basically, you've got to be able to, like I said earlier, you have to understand business. You have to understand the technology, not just the constraints, but it has a lot of possibilities as well. What is going on there, and like Madhuri said, having a story around it. See, a lot of the things, if you can tell the right story and get a lot of get empathy towards the users, then the reason why you're choosing certain things changes, right? The amount of work that you can do for a cause that you believe in versus the amount of work that you do just because someone told you to, is very different, right? So can we align our passions on that first, and then talk about the technology part of it? You will find that people buy in a lot more and are putting and are willing to align a lot more to a cause that they believe in, than if it is just a simple technical choice. So that's my kind of 2 cents on it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's totally true, Samir. 100%, I would agree with that. It also depends on the relationships that you build with your team.
Yeah.
Like if you have some great relation, not like personal relationships like that go too deep. Even just a jovial relationship that you can understand each other's differences and see how you can tweak it, how you can understand. If you can take that extra mile and understand why is the developer unable to produce certain things, like say certain frameworks Angular cannot produce a certain types of buttons or certain kind of tabs, we should be able to understand that and probably change a bit of the design. And these are the realities that will hit, and you have to be aware of that. And when you design it, you might have thought, okay, hey, awesome, I'm just going to put this awesome tab control, this will work. But when you go into the real meeting, and then they'll be like, no, this is not going to work, you have to come back and be okay with that. If it is really like a strong tip fight between both of the departments, then you have to resolve through better storytelling, better alignment, those kind of things, and bring in a better player who can actually understand and make people work together. You have to make them work together. It's not going to help any other way. Yeah.
So collaboration and communication is a bigger thing, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So like
And
our
when we
next,
are remote, it's over communication.
Over communication. Yes. 5x.
so we'll be covering the same theme, next panel.
Yes.
So we have one more question left, and unfortunately, Sid had to drop off, so he's facing some technical issues. So I'll ask you folks this question, and this is very interesting. Like, oh, Sid is apparently back. We'll just give it a few more seconds. We need him for this question.
So sorry, folks. It's just I don't know what is wrong with me.
So, Sid, I'll start with you. Like, this is a question to the whole panel, but I'll start with you. So, tell us about your biggest imposter syndrome crisis.
Oh damn! I think there's not one imposter syndrome crisis that I can point out to, not a single evidence, but overall, imposter syndrome builds up. Maybe a certain project that kept highlighting certain limitation you are facing with. Um, or it's sometimes it's just a conversation, right, you're having with somebody. Recently, I think not a crisis or whatever, I was discussing something with some designers, and some terminology comes up which I have no clue about because I've not been into academics, and that was a moment where I felt like shit, maybe I don't know anything about it, and later it turns out like just didn't know that term. So given like how personally speaking, like I don't think I don't let try not to let imposter syndrome turn into crisis. Like I spoke about having a support group, have a support group, so before it turns into a crisis of confidence, they can intervene and go like, you're fine, you're fine.
So, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I can talk about it. So yeah, I mean, it kind of happens every time I have a new role also, right? That, oh wait, I'm here, how do I do this now, right? And I don't have a crisis kind of thing that I can recall, but there are like Sid said, there are like small instances that keep happening from time to time, and sometimes you wonder that, okay, there is this huge mountain that you have to climb to get to the other end, but I don't even like have the fitness, or I don't have the shoes. What do I do now, right? And everyone seems like all geared up, and I'm like wearing my flip flops, right? So it does happen from time to time. And then then what you do is that, again, like you go back to your mentors, you go back to your supporters with whom you can have an honest conversation. There's so much, like we said earlier, there's so much information online to understand more about a topic, so you build up your learning. I think that is the main thing. Having that growth mindset is what balances out any kind of feeling that you might have, that okay, I can learn this. I may not know it right now, but I can learn it. And sometimes truly it does happen that you just don't know the term. You know what it is. You've taken those gut feel decisions because that's the right thing to do. You just didn't know that it's called this, right? And you should never let that kind of thing bog you down.
100% agree, Samir, because I've had so many moments because I've not had a traditional education. I'm like, oh, I don't know this. And I have to be constantly reassured by somebody that, okay, you know it, just that you don't know that term. So chill, it's fine. And that support group is so true. If you don't have it, you can just feel like shit. And so sorry, but that's, you really do feel like that. And there's no other better word to, understand that. And for me personally, I try not to tell let that go, because there used to be a point where I used to feel that I don't know anything. So somebody told me this very nicely: you always know only 1 inch, whereas there's a big sea out there, and don't try to hold that mug of water and think that this is all you know. Don't hold it and don't feel, oh, I don't know anything. There's one big sea there. You cannot contain the sea in that mug of water. It's not going to work. So probably that would probably ease a lot of imposter syndrome. It's okay if you don't know things. That's a big deal to say for everybody, that it's okay. It will take time, but you will reach there. It's fine.
Wow, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, folks. Like, this was very insightful. At least I learned a lot from all of you. And we'll be getting ready for our next panel. So before we close, I'll just like to introduce the panelists to the audience again. We have more folks. So first up is Samir. So, hey Samir. So Samir is managing design and both customer experience at Scriptbox. Please check out Scriptbox. They're changing the way we invest in mutual funds and look at our savings. We have Madhuri with us. So Madhuri is the co-founder of Experience Design School, and she's also running an excellent podcast called Hireworthy. Please check the website, which is mentioned right here. And one and only King Sidharth again.
Choose your character.
So please check out his awesome vlogs on Instagram and YouTube. And thanks again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rahul. Thanks a lot. And thanks to AwesomeConf. Have an awesome day, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining in,
everybody.
folks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, bye. Take care.
Hi. Hey everyone.
Hi.
I hope you guys can hear me. Welcome back. Welcome to our next set of panels. Yes, Khuzema is here too. I'll just quickly do the introduction. So, like before to our panelists, we are doing the second edition of Awesome Conference 2. This is the first time we are hosting design panels. We do have a code of conduct. We will show the link right here. So if there is anything uh, that is something that you want to report to, you can use that link. Also hear about what is allowed and what is not. Other than that, we do have we are doing some voluntary contributions to COVID Relief Fund. So if that is something that you feel excited about, do use our link here to donate with this UPI link. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to the amazing panelists for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about communication and negotiation as a design skill. And it is becoming relevant day and day as we move towards a little more towards the remote side of it. I'll introduce myself first. Hi, my name is Meenal. I am a senior UX designer at Wayfair. It's a home furnishing e-commerce company based out of US. Then we have our three amazing judges, panelists, starting with Arjun. Arjun is currently with Swiggy. Fatima is currently at Gojek. And then Khuzema, he is currently at Razorpay. Would you guys want to do a bit of introduction for yourself too?
So hi guys, thanks so much for tuning in today. It's pretty easy on a Sunday and we're all locked in the same place. Right? So I'm a UX design lead at Swiggy. I look at some of our consumer products which are tilted more around user growth and retention. And that's about it.
All right, I can go next. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in. I am Fatema, like Meenal mentioned. I work at Gojek. Currently, I'm heading design for GoFood, Gojek's food delivery app. So that's what I'm doing. So I look at a bunch of things for like an entire user journey of ordering food till the time you get your food in your hands. Everything is what sort of I tap into. So yes, that's what I do for Gojek.
Yeah, hope you guys can hear me now. Okay, so my name is Khuzema. I currently work with Razorpay as a senior product designer, preferably working specifically for Razorpay subscriptions. And before this, I worked with Freshworks and Zoho, both from Chennai, right now in Bangalore. That's about
Amazing, amazing. I think that one of the common themes that is also part of the previous discussion that we were having is you need to be good at storytelling. You need to have that communication with your stakeholders, with your users, and it becomes increasingly complex when you are in different set of environments. So our discussion for today, the first thing that I want to like jump into is like, what is the most effective way you convince your stakeholders, and stakeholders being like different kind of people that you interact with?
Okay. I can go first. Yeah, sure. Yeah, cool. I think, like you mentioned, right, different kind of stakeholders. Number one is to understand the language sort of they talk in, right? That's the communication 101, right? Like if you're talking to a product person, if they understand numbers, and that's what you talk with, right? If you're talking to a business person, then you talk with the language that they understand it. A lot of times we tend to essentially make the mistake of, like using design jargon, sounding too cool in a meeting. It does make you sound cool and smart, but not necessarily understood. So I think talking in the plain, simple language that they understand is what is the basic to communication. Another important thing that I learned while I was doing my design journey, like I come from a communication and a graphics background, and I wanted to make that shift into UI UX. And I think for them to convince them that I can do this, I want to do this, I had to show and tell. Like I could not like just tell them I want to do this, so I had to like do it and show it that I'm capable of doing it. So I think showing more than talking about things does help you communicate better. So I think that's been two of my major ways of communicating with my stakeholders effectively.
I totally agree with what Fatma said. Right? Show and tell is technically like our superpower on the table. Right?
Yeah.
So there are people from very diverse backgrounds, and this is what you're kind of helping everyone achieve. Right? Everyone interprets their products and their visions in a very different way, and your job as a designer in that time is basically to funnel that down and actually productize it. And one other thing which I have like noticed in terms of helping me a lot is the fact that we it took some time, but now there's an understanding that everyone is empowering the product in a very very different way. A person from business is empowering it in a very different way. A person from
Yes.
product is empowering. So you owe it to yourself and to them to make sure that you're also on the same page. So it's not, and show and tell is like a very good convincing tool. But first, there's a lot of personal barriers you need to break, right? In terms of understanding where you stand in that team, right? There are narratives which you bring in, which are very very key to that product process, to the shaping of this product. So understanding these narratives of yourself and of the teammates around you, it helps a lot. That's something which I have. It took some
Yeah.
time to put myself from the away from the equation, and then understanding what I actually bring in. But
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
to us.
I think I agree entirely, right? Like, I think there are different aspects. Like, initially, when we are starting off in the design journey, we are too naive to think that it's only us bringing the right perspective on the table. But when you sort of deep dive and you understand what your other stakeholders are trying to achieve, together is when you are able to make like a good product. And I remember one of backing Arjun's point on narrative, right? I think we are user advocates essentially as designers, right? So I remember a long time ago there was one tweet on how when people are ordering at Gojek, they cannot just put their phone aside and sort of not worry about their food and the food will reach them. So how when we started doing design discussions or anything, I started using that character or that user through all my meetings and all my discussions. That became like sort of the magnet point for everything that you remember that tweet, that user, they cannot put their phone aside and without anxiety just expect the food to show up on the doorstep. So like probably figuring out that one narrative, sticking to it, keep repeating it is what also sort of helps you in effective communication. Like stick to your story and find that story to begin with. So
Khuzema?
yeah.
I would strongly agree with both of you. Majority of these points which I was thinking is what you guys both say. I would like to add a few more things on top of it. So I come from a background where I was actually, in Chennai, I had an event management company and then moved into support, and then I moved into graphic and game design, and then later, stumbled upon UX. All of these initial, like being into customer support or being into event management, it depends heavily on how you explain the value of what you're bringing for your customer, right? Now that's a very similar story with UX also. Majorly now with people we work with all of our company mates, right? Like they're really really smart people, they know what they want and they have a strong reason as to why they want it that way. But you a lot of time come across some adamant folks who are really sold on what they believe in. They have a very strong perception that what they say is right and that you have to follow them. Obviously, as you said, right, design is never a single sport, it's always about a team. When you gather ideas from your team, you can definitely go ahead with. But how do you deal with some people who are really adamant on their solution towards it? So I mean, there's always been there's been some cases like that as well. So it's always to include more and more designers and more people in the discussion, because if I believe that if I have one perception about one idea or one way to see it, different people bring in different ways to seeing it as well. So I definitely agree with the more people you have in for a brainstorm session, or the more people you bring in who can give their feedback, the more better it is.
And
Yeah.
adding on to that, right? Like, I think you're very right. We always end up in very tricky situations sometimes where we don't know whether like things which we thought were non-negotiables for us might not be a big priority for others. So, like, what's helped me a lot is that make sure that there's a deep understanding of the principles early on in the process. Everyone is aligned on the principle towards which we're designing for, right? But the moment something strays away, I mean, obviously there's a lot of factors which come into play. It's our go-to-market strategy, our timeline, our engineering feasibility, things like that. They do come into play. So you do have to make compromises and if be willing to, accept change. But there are some non-negotiables where I've actually ended up having to burn bridges with and having to have really heated up arguments. But I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I'm sure even Khuzema, you would also agree that it's still something which is part of the process. The confrontation, the conflict, all that actually still adds a lot more value to the end process. And then
it definitely does. It definitely does. As you touch upon this topic of things being understood, things being non-negotiable, right? But there's always a chance that someone assumes that these things are going to change, right? And the later you rectify it, the bigger of a problem it becomes in this whole journey. Like after you're done the initial design and someone else comes and says that, hey, you know what, I thought you're delivering this too. And that is something which is dependent on your first block, right? So there's a domino effect which makes all of your work until now get useless, and then you have to start from scratch, and that's very frustrating when you do it the second time. So one way how we solve it is we have at Razorpay there's a very strong notion of documenting everything you do, right? So you document even the obvious stuff. Like at later point of time, if there's any open question, we obviously have a note that said that, we agreed upon this and only then we moved from there to here. So there's no chance we're going back or touching anything upon it. Like there are obviously better ways to do it, but I think this is what works out best for us, so that we don't fight. We just point towards that document that this is what it is, and you have to accept it.
Yeah, I agree. But there will always be that hippo in the room who will want to sort of like put it down, right? That this is what I want. So I agree to both you and Arjun in that sense that there will be certain confrontation that will be required. There will be certain burning of bridges that will happen. But I think even when we are designing as designers, and this has happened so many times in the past, that we are aware that this will happen. I think we should ideally be prepared, like design at a scale that is not for today, but sort of for tomorrow. And also be prepared that if someone makes an unreasonable request, there is no way that we can say no. Figure out a subtle way to put it in different things. It doesn't have to be the most obvious button on top, right? You figure out like a win-win situation and you figure out where to fit that in, because probably they have a different perspective that they are bringing in. So that's what I generally do. Whenever we are designing something, I foresee that this request can come in a year later or 6 months later by the time this is built. So always have like sort of some space for that, or some room for that request to come in, because some hippos you will not be able to avoid for sure.
Does beer count as a subtle way?
Sometimes it does help. Getting a hippos tipsy helps.
But it only delays the problem. Once that bitterness is gone, the hippo will be back again.
Yeah.
That's called the hangover.
Yeah. For the audience, we have the Slido link here. So if there are any questions that you would like the panelists to answer, do pose the questions here. Going back to the subject, I think two very interesting things that you talked about was like show and tell and a much better documentation. And then taking into account that this is going to happen, like it is inevitable as like Earth getting destroyed at some point in time, maybe. But it is an inevitable discussion to have, like, how do we deal with situations? And I think the next question that I have is like, how do you pick your battles, these negotiations at work? Like, what do you need to like really change into, and something that like you just give in, like, because it's not worth fighting for?
Oh, okay. So I think all of us sort of have limited resources in terms of times, right? Everything that we feel important, we are not going to be able to do it. So we will have to first pick the things that we think are important. I think before we also make a pitch for a defendant, we ideally should be aware of the exact problem that they are solving. We should know why they are doing it. One way that helps me understand if this is the problem that I want to solve is think of the best and the worst case scenario, that if I solve this, what is the best thing that will happen? If I solve this, what is the worst that can go wrong? And if I don't solve, what is the worst that can go wrong? So that sort of helps me prioritize my things. And how I negotiate these things is to find a win-win situation, understand what are the other problems, what are problems that others are trying to solve, and how can I align what I have in my bucket to what they have in their bucket, and sort of negotiate in that terms. So I think finding a win-win generally always helps in negotiating. So yeah, that's sort of been my strategy to it so far. So like it's important to like be aware of the goals and problems that everyone is solving, not just from a design perspective. So yeah, please go on. Sorry.
Of course. So definitely agree with what Fatema says. One way how I think about it is, there are many things in this process which are understood. Like you get a problem statement, you understand that problem statement, and you're very clear that this is an actual problem and we need to solve this, right? Once that is understood, I imagine the solution to be in form of how, this is just my analogy of looking at it. Like, how a JPEG image loads in a slower internet connection. So you have a background and then it's blurry, and then slowly, it starts getting detailed as your internet loads. Right? You go with the design also as similarly as possible. Like you bring a basic skeleton that can be a sketch or that can be a wireframe or whatever it is. It tells the concept, and then you start building more and more upon it. Right? In between all of this, right? Like I am telling you this whole story because in between any of this part where someone, let's say a PM or a dev or someone comes and tells that, we should not do this because it can have this kind of a problem, or that can or they push back for any of such reason, right? You will be able to tell them that what is your idea from the start and how do you want to see it once it's completed. If they are able to be onboarded on your vision about this whole solution, there are very high chances that they will agree with you. If not, then I definitely ask them that what is your vision for it, and if I agree to their vision, then we can definitely both work together with our ideas, right? There's obviously a conflict between both of us. There can be a conflict, like he agrees to me or he does not agree to me. In that case, I obviously bring in other stakeholders, and then I let them fight, and then I'm like, whatever you guys decide, and then I will put in my inputs as well, whichever works. So there's obviously battles and negotiation which we need to decide whether these are important or not. Like if you're working on a project and there's a deadline which is next week, you can't come and say that I don't want this page layout to be like this. We'll definitely not take that up. But if someone comes and says that what, we need to look at a different color for a button, or maybe you need to change a little bit of that position if it's not impacting, then maybe we can talk about it. So it depends on how important or how big of a change it is and what time frame of that solution deliverable it is. I've had a huge argument which went on for like a few weeks just for discussing we should have an OTP field with 6 individual text boxes or one single text box. We even floated a PRD for that. We even debated about it for a few weeks. But then we went ahead with a single text field after all that, just because we did not want to stretch that any further. None of us gave in, but we just saved that argument for later because tech was about to so me and PM were fighting and dev are like, bas karo yaar, we just need to go ahead. Let's just not do this. So there are cases when someone needs to give in because we are all working towards one shared goal, towards one final product, and because of our fight, the product should not suffer because that's what we all are fighting for. That's from my side.
The number of times that has happened when the developer said, "Yeah, can you guys stop fighting?" So actually, for me, earlier on in my career, right, when these sort of product initiatives started coming in together, I always used to oscillate between two phases. Either I was extremely overwhelmed by all the input and all the perspectives coming in, and to a point where I'll just be like, what, this is too overwhelming for me. I'll just do what you guys want me to do. Or the other side was that I'll just get obsessed about one particular thing, start picking on one nitty-gritty and spend way more time than I thought I should be spending. So these two mindsets used to keep colliding very often. That's when over time I've realized that you need to keep an eye on the end goal, which everyone aligns with. So if every single decision you make, you need to compare it to that end goal.
Exactly.
This is actually an emotional value. There's a lot of emotion attached to what we build, and it's true for our users as well. So there's a big difference between designer emotion, creator emotion, versus user emotion. So we need to make sure that we always keep trumping our designer emotion all the time. Creator emotion has to be trumped. Having said that, if you know that it's adding value to that end user emotion, then go right ahead. Do not listen to anyone and make sure that you push that product. Having said that, that's again explaining that to internal stakeholders becomes very tricky. That's why I think time is a very important ally here, right? We need to keep investing more and more time with our engineering teams, with our product management, so that eventually it's the wavelength which you share. It's a common wavelength, and conversations become so ridiculously easy, right? You can just say, what, dude, let's do this. I know it's going to take 2 more days, but let's do this because this is going to be a great emotional ad for our end user. And that's essentially the language. Everyone is on that same page. You don't realize until you have that conversation that everyone is actually on that same page.
Exactly. I completely agree. I think also having proved something sort of by yourself helps you get that confidence from others also easily. So always go right ahead and keep pushing stuff out and proving yourself, and keep an eye on what you pushed out, how is that performing actually? A lot of us like tend to forget about designs once we push out, and we don't really see how they're performing. And there's no other way to know other than actually looking at the numbers or the impact analysis of sort, that how it is doing, and probably that can become your argument for later, right? That can become your confidant for later when you're convincing the stakeholders and building that relationship with them. So yeah, that's one of the things that I think completely agreed, Arjun. Sort of to build that rapport in itself, so that this conversation does not come up. Like, it's just a healthy discussion always. It's never like a negotiation of sort.
It's mostly a healthy conversion. Yes. Yes, please go ahead, Arun.
No, so I was just talking about like how there's an induction period now, like an unsaid induction period in pretty much every product, in pretty much every project we build. That early stage alignment, I've realized, is key to the entire process, right? Like that early stage of people hanging out and like jamming on a product, just getting together, cuts it makes things so easy, because we're all building things in ridiculous hyper growth scale now, right? Like, time is never our friend in terms of go-to-market strategies. Time is never our friend. So it just becomes so easy. It's come to a point where now I can represent my product manager in meetings. My product manager can represent me in meetings of product design. I pick those meetings very carefully, but yeah, this happens. I never thought it was a possibility that we could come to a place like this, but then that having empathy for each other, keeping that end goal in mind, has helped so much.
So Arjun, like, what sort of helped you in building this relationship with your PMs, or building this entire rapport with the entire team, having empathy for each other, right? It will take you some tangible actions. It could be anything, like sort of, before starting off a project, just jamming and brainstorming together, right? Instead of just being it within the design team, like do it with the PMs. What are the other things that I remember Swiggy had done a workshop also recently on design and research collaboration. So what have you guys been doing essentially to build this sort of a relationship within the team?
I think it all comes down to everyone, letting everyone know that you give a damn.
Yeah.
And that counts for a lot. Every action you do is basically that you need to let these guys know that, listen, I am on your same page. I get the fact that you have these metrics to meet. I get the fact that you really want to build and ship this. I know that this is very important to our business at this point in time. Right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
So, it takes a lot of time. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, this is what, like, a lot of us don't even get involved in what is the business goal or what are they even trying to achieve. We are so blinded at that point. I think it's important, like what you said, right? For us to understand what business goals is everyone trying to achieve. The step one to that is us knowing and getting involved in setting up those goals with them, right? So about 2 years ago, I was never involved in the process of setting up OKRs for the product, but now I am, and that makes a huge difference. Me even going and commenting on the OKRs that at the draft stage makes a real difference into bringing that design perspective in, or that user perspective in, other than just profit and numbers. Although it's very important to sustain that too, because if there is no business, there's going to be no product and there's going to be no design in the first place. So yeah, I completely agree to your point on that.
And I would like to add a few more things. I'm sorry, Arjun, please go ahead.
No, please go ahead. I was just...
one thing is, obviously, the more empathy you have, the more you understand the people you're working with, the more better you will be able to catch their wavelength. The reason why I say this is because if you catch their wavelength better, you'll be in a position to better understand why they are, supporting you or going against your idea or your way of thinking. The way I see it is, luckily, in majority of these companies I've been with, you are absolutely right that time is never in our favor, especially when you're working on a project. And if you are joining a company and suddenly put into a project right then and there without knowing anyone, it's very difficult for you to assume who's on your side, who's not on your side. And there's always this doubt of, if you have a silly, weird idea, which can be good for product, which can be bad for product, but you will be afraid to, express your ideas to people in fear of what if they judge me, what if they, see at me in a different way, what if they don't really look at me that way, then I'll not be considered as a good person to judge others' ideas, right? For me, things worked out because the first two companies I worked with, the moment I joined, the second week we went on a trip to different parts of India, and I've got like more than 15-20 days to spend with majority of them. It gives me a fair idea of how they think, how they walk, how they talk, and the way they work, and that brings you that bridge between others, and who's going to be receptive of your ideas and who's going to go against it. Luckily for Freshworks, it's not the case. Sorry, Razorpay, it's not the case since I did not go on a trip with them. But the first project you work with, it's also about how much time you spend. Like there are some awesome people, you spend a lot of time working with. You be in the office for the whole night. You go at their houses, you continue working with them. It also brings you in that same wavelength of those people. You know who you are comfortable with, who you are not comfortable with. And in all of these projects, there are three major kind of people you deal with. One is that Sadu developer guy who's going to oppose you for every single input you give, no matter how good it is. And he'll give some complicated jargons and give you 500-year-old timelines that it's not going to be possible. Other is the guy who's obviously going to support you in no matter what you do because he just loves you for no reason. Third is that moderator who's going to step in the moment you start a fight with any of these. And he's going to step in and say, like, just stop it. Let's just do this or let's just do that. And his one word will be enough for us to decide on something. Because if no one steps in, we'll just keep on fighting forever and ever. And a lot of times, though this should not be the case, but there are people who take it on their ego. It's like, how can you say no to my idea? My ideas are always the best and you have to adhere to it. But the moment you say no to it, this fight just gets escalated to a different level, right? And there are people who will be like, "Arey yaar, kya karu iska?" And they just leave you alone, right? If you have that moderator, if you have someone who look up to as moderator, they always have power to bring you back on track, and you can channel that energy towards going ahead in that product. So yeah, wavelength does matter, but so understanding who's on your side and who's not on your side matters.
Effective stereotyping. I like
Yep. I mean, I totally see all of this happening around when I do these discussions, and we are more or less understanding of how to interact, which battles to choose, what is more important to you. And I think figuring that out is the key to having those discussions. And with this, we will move on to the last part of our session today, which is before the Q&A. What is the weirdest thing you have done to convince your stakeholders? What are the real out of the box techniques that are not necessarily usual, but something that work for you?
I mean, we've all been desperate enough to pull off a few weird things. Right? So I will just set some context here. So at Swiggy, we kind of drive a lot of early stage product positioning, right? And because I have a background as a brand designer, I really enjoy shaping this product positioning angle of things. And a lot of products which I build are fairly heavy on the consumer facing. So we have to be very cautious about this. So product teams own product and design teams together. They own this early stage product positioning. I mean, there's a lot of mind share coming in from marketing and business. Right? So it becomes very difficult and tricky to write for this product, right? Because everyone has different vocabulary, everyone has different communication, everyone has a very, even internally, people have a very different perception of this. So I found it very easy to start attaching products to superheroes. So I started positioning products to, let's say, this is a Captain America product. So it's a goodie, it's a very nice, Boy Scout product. So this is a Captain America product. This is an Iron Man product. I had to start doing this. It helps that I spend a lot of time watching Marvel movies, but I never thought that will come in handy. But this has started happening. I had to literally say, listen, you can't sell this like LIC. You have to sell this like Deadpool. So that was one weird. It somehow works, or at least I tell myself that it works. It pacifies me.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure everyone loves superheroes. So I'm sure there is. That's an interesting way of convincing someone. So at Gojek, I remember there used to be a lot of these requests that kept coming in, day out, and so we used to sit, make this about 2 years ago. We used to sit, make wireframes, flesh everything out, and then they'll be like, "Oh, this is not feasible. We are not going ahead with this," and it kept happening in a repetitive manner. And that's when I learned that sometimes, instead of trying to convince my stakeholders to, this is not what we want to do, just confuse them. So confuse them if you can't convince them is what I sort of did. And a way I did that was, the 5 whys framework. And if they give you something, just keep asking why. Okay, then why? Why are we doing this? But why? What will happen? What will change? Just ask them why 5 times. And I think they go back. I remember this happened with me recently We were building the edit order feature, like once you place your food order and then you want to edit your food. And they came that, we need wireframes for this without like sort of understanding the amount of edge cases that will go into it in terms of payments, vouchers, etc. And like all I had to do was like ask 5 times why, and then they're like, "Oh, we don't think we should be doing this right now. Okay, wait, let us come back with more context and more numbers on this." And like that sort of helped. It was a weird thing I thought initially, the 5 whys framework, but I tried and it really worked. So yeah, that's been my way. Just confuse them, just ask questions and confuse the shit out of them. It helps you and them, so it's a good way.
I'm getting a feeling Fatema has done this a lot.
Yeah, man, I've done this a lot.
Straight from college.
Oh, by the way, people who don't know Arjun, I went to the same college, same batch, in fact.
Yeah, we did time in the same jail together. Your life, sorry.
For me, right, like when I joined Zoho, Zoho was my first company, and I was in really good wavelength and good terms with almost everyone. My design manager, the head of PMs, and the all the PMs who are heading the team. And I was really close with this guy who was heading the PM team. I would constantly ask him questions like, why are we building an accounting software? No one uses accounting software these days. Sabka internet itna slow hai. Who do you think will trust you with their financial information? And who will, connect their bank accounts? And he's like, we are not doing it for Indian markets. It's okay. And then I would be like, we would somewhere do it for Indian markets. Why don't we, make something which is useful for Indian markets right now, since we are also based in India? Don't you think? तो मेरे अंदर का वो पेट्रियोटिक बंदा जाग गया था, लाइक आप इंडिया में रह के इंडिया के लोगों के लिए कुछ नहीं करोगे? And then he's like, what do you think is ideal? I'm like, मैं सोच के बताता हूँ, because I didn't have an answer to it. So then I had to come back with something, right? Like he gave me an answer and he asked me a question, I didn't have an answer to it. So I told him that, how many people use our product? He said more than 10,000 people every day. And I'm like, how many new people come? And he said more than 1,000, 2,000 people every day. And then I told him that how will these people know how to use the product? And then he looked at me and then he's like, I've added this question to my priority list. I will get back to you जैसे ही मुझे answer मिलता है. And I was so happy that देखो मैंने भी एक सवाल पूछा, he does not have answer to. Then he came back to me like 2 दिन बाद and then he's like, Khuzema, you're right. You know what? This backfired on me. And he asked me like, you know what? I'm shifting it to a different team. Why don't you for a week try to make onboarding videos for our users? Now I also took it as a challenge that I'm a designer, I can also do anything. How will I not be up for a challenge? That's what makes me, right? So I worked on like different multiple video formats. Like there's this old software called Camtasia, and after I was checking with Adobe Premiere Pro and stuff, and I used the screen recording, put this shadow in sketches and in sketch tool, and made this beautiful slow software onboarding experience with एक शांति वाले रूम में जाके मैंने सारे ऑडियोस रिकॉर्ड किए and all that. And then he's like, you know what, this actually looks good. How about you make onboarding videos permanently? अभी से तो डिजाइन मत कर. And I'm like, नहीं, this is not the deal. मेरे को नहीं करना है. And he's like, now that you've already done that, पहला output काफी अच्छा है. Why don't you go and try it for some time? And then this goes on for like 3 months and 4 months and 6 months. And after a point, I felt so bad, and I went to him and I'm like, या तो मैं job छोड़ रहा हूँ या तो मैं डिजाइन कर रहा हूँ. I'm not doing video editing अभी से. That's it. मेरे को नहीं करना. And then like, I thought you love it. I'm like, I loved it, but that does not mean I love only that. I love many other things. मेरे को नहीं करना, ठीक है, मेरे को निकालो यहाँ से. And that is when he finally put me back in that team. And then ever since that time, I've never gone with a challenge to any of these people. It did help me convince them, but it backfired heavily on me. He tried convincing me, मेरे से नहीं हुआ, अच्छी बात है.
Yeah, Khuzema, we are looking for someone to make onboarding for us in Gojek. You want to join or what?
Oh, please.
No. Some major backfiring happening.
Sorry.
So we will start.
Hell, man. How bad can it be? That's what I was thinking.
Yep, it really went bad for you. So we now will jump on to the questions that we have. Starting with the first one, which is, how do you negotiate between the time frame, priority to the quality of design with the stakeholders? How does that work for you?
I think first you negotiate with yourself, right? You look at the time frame and you look at what's the best thing you can achieve here, right? That's where your non-negotiables come in. right? That's where the principle set in, and that's where your first alignment. That that's your first buy-in, right? You need to commit after that, and then after that, there's no going back on that. So that first negotiation with yourself helps a lot, and after that, it's like understanding and sitting with people and just understanding what attaches to these non-negotiables, then just going forward and what. Guys?
Yes. I think you agree to a time frame or a priority, as definitely agree with what Arjun added. But there's also a list of possible many other factors, right? If there is a project which is a little bigger and which depends a lot on research, right? These are external factors. So you have to taken time that you request for that data for those merchants. You study these user problems first. Then you frame these questions. You get this data. You reach out to these people, and there's always a ratio, right? You reach out to 50 people, you get like 10 people answer your question. Out of these 10, there is very less data which is actually usable for you. And based on this data, what are the insights and how do you go forward with it? The more time you give for each, the more stronger your backing for these things will be. Also, if there is a lot of input coming for an existing solution already, it may be good for an improvement, but it may not always be good for some new feature which you're building, right? Because you've done the research, but you're getting feedback for something which is already there and you can improve it. We never wanted that, right? In those use cases, you need to do some more research on top. Like it's difficult to show value at this point because you're spending a lot of time on research with very less value being shown. But when you complete this cycle, right, and that is when you understand how much of a work has actually been done. Like if there's a small request which only needs you to do some kind of hypothesis validation and some visual design or something which is dependent completely on you, you can control that time frame. But as the more external factor come in, the more difficult explaining that time frame is. So I always give them a tentative date that this is what we are thinking we get done with, and if we do it, well and good. If we don't do it, you definitely should have a reason why it did not get completed on that time, right? If we don't give a time frame, then others give us a time frame. So it's either or, but you definitely get a time frame.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I think the next question is sort of similar. I can cover it up in the next question as well.
Yeah. Before we do that, for anyone who is watching this, please post your questions either by the Slido link or the YouTube comment section. And yes, like moving on to the next question, which is like very, very similar, like between doing what's right and what's easy. Like, how do you go about negotiating design decisions with volatile ROIs, user trade-offs? And I think metrics is like one big part of it. So like, how do you use that to make those trade-offs?
So I mean, I can go to that. So there has always been like this debate of speed versus quality in design, right? Like whenever sort of we are getting things done, I think like what Arjun said, right? First, you need to figure out if this is a problem that is even worth solving, right? And how do you sort of get that into picture? This has always been my first question on every documentation that I make. Is this even a real problem to solve? Why do I think so? And then I will have my data from my BI team or data from my qualitative research to like back that up. And I think one of the ways to sort of also is very early on to figure out what your success metrics are going to be. Like if I make this change, right, what in my product, how in my product, or what in my numbers will reflect it, right? So I think having that also at a very early on stage helps you sort of make that decision as to if this has any ROI or no. Plus, I think if there are any risks that you have, the best way ideally is to do is like I said earlier also, right? Figure out what is the worst that can happen if this does not go out and what is the best that can happen. And if there is a risk, what is the sort of minimum thing that you need to do to validate if this risk is real or no, right? So that will sort of help you quickly with speed, push something out, get some more validity out, like launch to learn. Sometimes you just have to launch to learn things. Sometimes they have to be pushed out into quality. So again, it depends on like feature to feature. So I think that's how I generally use my matrix and my numbers to sort of validate a problem and even a solution or a risk.
So, yeah. Actually, adding to that, right and easy, these are perspectives of ways of looking at things. So having said that, over time, you realize that individuals, you as an individual and individuals around you, we always have a sense of benchmarking. So what is right and easy and quality to one person is very different from the other, right? So that's where like that early stage alignment, right, comes in, and everyone aligns on at least the benchmark we need to achieve. And let that be ridiculously high or like.
Yeah, I think this also goes back to the previous point that you made, Arjun, right? Like have your principles set in early so that everyone knows what is exactly that we are trying to achieve, so that you can point them there and direct them there that this is what we are trying to achieve. We are digressing right now, so yeah.
And that's where what Khuzema also said, right, about owning what aspects of this you which belong to you, right? So like how he said, visual design is still under my control, right? So there's not a battle I need to pick with others. There's a battle I need to pick with myself. So I should keep pushing the edge over here, right? So easy is not like the word I would use for it. I would say this is the best I should be doing here. This is my jam. Let me just really knock this out of the park, right? So that's what happens when you benchmark. Once you're benchmarked early, right, and then you know that you have total faith. Once you have total faith that others are also going to be doing the same thing around you. Your product manager is also taking care of this launch strategy this way. Your business is also taking care of bringing the supply calls. Your engineering team is also aligning. So once you know all these things, you're actually allowed to do the best of your work with all these factors in mind. So like that's something which over time we just keep getting better at. And yeah, like picking your battles, that just becomes like the day-to-day grunge. Like it's just I've come to terms with it now. Made my peace.
Even when I started early, I realized the same thing, right? Like my assumption was very simple. Like we were naive those days, right? We all did this. So if my PM would come and tell me that, Khuzema, this is the problem, we need a solution to it by next Monday. Now we are talking on Monday, and he's saying that a week Monday to Friday kaam kar lo, we'll look at a solution on next Monday. And I was like, no, we will not be able to do it because at least iske liye 2-3 hafta lagega. But then they are like, no, that's not how it works, right? Remember the third category of people I spoke to you about? He's like, you got to do it in 1 week, that's it. Now I tied that proportionately to the more early you want, the more low quality of an output you get, and you have to either agree to it or give me more time to work on it. Definitely that was wrong, I agree, but it was not more about the product, it was more about the people I was working with, right? Later when I moved to different organizations, I worked with different kind of people. I had this amazing manager who told me one thing, right? Like, you can solve a problem in 1,000 ways. You can give 1,000 different outputs for one single problem, but your output differs on your personality, how you see a problem, how you see a solution to it, right? Like anyone can design a beautiful solution for any problem, but what is it that you as a designer, you as Khuzema bring to that table, right? Like for example, Swiggy itself, right? There are multiple different platforms who let you order food, but what makes it delightful, what makes it easy to use, what makes it quick for the user? Because a user is not fond of opening Swiggy app the whole day and looking at its offerings. No, they will only come in when they want to order something. They'll just want to get out of it as early as possible, right? Now we as a designer, how we make it easier, and there's always this aspect of how do I add more value on top of what is already being solved? Like there's a business problem which is already being solved, but what can I add on top of it? Like that's the icing on the cake, that's cherry on top, which only I can bring in because I have a different vision to it. I have a different solution to it. We need to complete this problem in that time frame. But there's always like, if अगर मैंने ये प्रॉब्लम सही से सॉल्व नहीं किया तो फिर मैं काय का डिजाइनर यार. Like I have to bring that something to the table, right? And that is what, like, no matter who does what, we as a designer, we need to do our jobs best. Like someone can ask you for that time frame कि मुझे आज के यार चाहिए, but you try to convince them कि चलो, if you giving me that time कि और 2-3 दिन ज़्यादा दे रहे हो, well and good. If you're not giving me, then still, if I am really interested in that problem, I will put in more time from my side. Does not matter if I get working hours or not. I will put in my time because I am passionate about it. And the overall final output is not about if companies achieving that goal. That's understood. That's already there. But it's also about how happy and how satisfied you are with that output. Like Girish Madhavutam, the CEO of Freshworks, would say this: if you are happy to put your name on solutions you are bringing out, then you are a good designer and you're a good builder in every case. But if you're ashamed of showing your projects, then you're not supposed to work on it.
This is exactly true. I mean, and we will jump to the last question because I've been told we are running very late. And this is very true. Like, so the question here is like, is it advisable to put optimized version of applications in your UX portfolio when you are like trying to get a job that, so even when you don't, while you're negotiating for a job, what version of applications while you're building it, like maybe you know, don't, you bring a unique perspective in building those unique things. Like, what is advisable for somebody who is doing that in the UX portfolio, and is it different?
So I think if anyone is putting a optimized version of any app, right, there is a lot of decisions and there is a lot of discussions or goals that go behind before you see a final product out on the app or out on your phone, right? So I think when you're making an optimized version, up until you're making any hypothesis of, for example, if this was a business goal of this, it does not really make sense if you only look at it from the interaction design perspective or from the UX perspective, just the way on the app that it works, because there are a lot of back end decisions that have been made, a lot of back end discussions that have gone into it to make it the way it is. So I think up until in your portfolio, you're not putting in a narrative and a storyline that hypothetically, let's assume this is what the goal was, and then get into it. It would not do justice essentially to what you're trying to put in the optimized version, because you might not know what you're missing out on. You don't know what you don't know. So
Totally.
that's what I would.
Totally. Like it's basically that, right? It comes down to that person taking an effort in trying to understand your product. If that exists, after that, if they've done that hypothesis, if they've done their homework, and then they come to, within their means, I'm not expecting them to know like the business in and out. I just hope that there's a certain empathy to the fact that we designers have very fragile egos, right? So our first thing when someone suggests this should have been done instead is like confrontation. So basically let them to know, we need to know that they have done their homework and they give a damn in this sort of space which they're dabbling with. Because if they don't do that effort before they kind of put that optimized version, right? It's as good as my grandmom asking me for a feature request on Swiggy. Right? It needs to come from a fact that, and but I've seen cases when they've done this very well. I've met candidates when they've done this very well. But I don't need to look specifically when I'm speaking to that person. I don't need to look for where that person is going to come in and bring a fresh perspective. That person has already done that. That person has gone, like, put in a massive effort in terms of revisioning something useful for your product, which you can leverage. It doesn't have to be in the same shape and form and as which that person is exploded then, but then that person is open to change. So I think it's a big plus to do this, but provided you do it well and you have a lot of information back in.
Sorry, I was on mute. I spoke a lot, but I was on mute. Anyways, I'll just start again. So there's this quote, right, from this guy called Jason Fried, which even Samir spoke about in previous panel. So Jason talks about ideas which are being built, right? Like, you don't build something just because you want to earn money from it, right? You can build a product when you are scratching an itch, you are solving a problem. And the deeper understanding you have of that problem, the better you'll be able to solve that problem, because that's how better you'll be able to see it. He calls it scratching your own itch, right? Like, if you are recreating a product from scratch, it's very well possible. You can definitely do it, provided that you are also a victim of that. Like, for example, let's say if you are someone who feels irritated by not having control of money you spend, right? Then you build a solution around tracking your money, tracking your income, tracking your expense. That's a different solution, right? That's a different way you see it, because you have that problem yourself, versus you go and solve for a different problem which you have no context about. That's a different approach. Like, obviously there are smart people who have no context about it, but they still set out and they learn about it and they solve it. Like, Elon Musk did not know about building rockets, but he read everything with books, and then he still built this thing. He blasted a few rockets, that's a different story, but he is still successful, right? The point is, if you have a problem, you want to build a solution for it, and then you make a solution, then you make a case study about it, and then you at a job interview, you're in a much better position to explain the reasons for why you created that product, what kind of problems you face, what kind of solutions you face. there can be a few use cases which you might have missed, but that is bound to happen because it's not something which is going to be tangible in the future, right? It's not going to see a dev effort. Like a lot of times, devs ask the hard questions, right? Sometimes we miss a lot of things, like because design is always a team sport. When you work on something from your own perspective, you don't see it because things are in your blind spot. You only focus on what you want, and if you try to close everything, you will end up everything, but everything will be incompleted. You will not be able to complete everything, right? So it's either out of 150 things are completed properly, or 100 things are incomplete 50%, right? So how I see it is, if you are that person who has that problem, then you can definitely solve it better. But if you have no context about it and you have no ideas about what problem you're solving, why you're solving for, then it's a very tough thing to do, and you will only go and embarrass yourself in an interview. So never do that.
Good advice from Khuzema. Applying for resume, please take these things specifically into consideration. I think we have had like a good conversation on what matters, what does not matter, and like we'll end with like a parting thought that you would like the audience to like have going forward. So like maybe starting with you, Fatema.
I think being true to the topic of conversation here, which is communication as negotiation, right? I think I would just like to quote Abhinit, our design head, who's always given me this advice, right? Like, whenever you're communicating or negotiating, just be confident. If you can't, just fake confidence. Just fake till you make it, right? Like, just fake it till you make it. So I think that would be my parting thought to everyone. Like, just fake that confidence. And I think the way I could easily do it is to just enjoy what I'm doing instead. Like, add that humor to make myself have fun and laugh. So I think that has always been my parting thought. That will be my parting thought. That has always been my principle, right? Abhinav keeps having this one dialogue that he keeps saying, everything is chill, everything is chill, don't worry, just have fun. So that's really helped me, like in like being this confident, or bringing in that fake confidence, at least I can, while negotiating.
Yeah, I think for me it's owning the narrative, right? Owning your narrative, because it's essentially what is a product company setup, right? You are a bunch of people designing and building something for a lot of people. So when you understand each other and understand your place in that, right? And then what Fatma said is very important. Like sometimes your narrative could just be you just bringing in a lot of fun into that.
Exactly.
That counts for a lot. You don't even realize that helps shape your product, right? That delight metrics would go in, which would not have come in without you owning a narrative. So be okay with owning a narrative consistently, and be open to that change. So I think obviously everyone is kind of bringing in more mind shares, right? So be open to having your mind change and just own your narrative through and through. That's my main.
For me, one quote from my previous company's manager, like I told you about the three kind of people you deal with, right? My previous company manager is that first person who's always going to support you. And I have a lot of such people at Razorpay also. I talk about that as well. So what Senthil told me is just one thing, right? Like if you're a designer and you are happy with what you do, you are satisfied with what you create, then there's nothing which can stop you, right? There are obviously ways that you can, make sure you can have fun at work, which is rightly said by Fatima and Arjun as well. But what he means to say is that this journey will have up and downs, but at the end, if you are happy with what you create, that's what gives you confidence. That's what gives you that motivation to learn what you have done right, what you have not done right, and that's what helps you grow, right? At Reserpe, there's this very good saying which Saurabh always says, Sony always says, "Ki yoga se hi hoga." Now there are multiple ways to see it. First is obviously you need to have a very calm mind to understand what problem is, right? What you're solving. You don't need to listen to reply. You need to listen so that you make sure that you are understanding what the other person is saying, and then reply back to them with you being understanding what they want to do. So I'm completely up for it, and there are a lot of such folks at Razorpay. Even Harish has a lot of good inputs, but I'm not going to say everything right now. Maybe in the after party, I have a lot of other stories to share. But that's what it is. If you're happy to put your name on it, then there's nothing stopping you. And I personally, and I take all of my design outputs, all of the way I work, the output, the kind of output I produce, I take them to my heart. I take them personally. And if there's something which I'm not doing good, it kind of hurts me in my head all the time. until I improve upon it. So that's something which is very close to me, because as a person, right, like my first company's manager told me that you spend 8 to 9 hours every day of your life, and for the rest of your life, most probably, if you don't die early. Yeah, he was sarcastic, but he said this, that if you spend all of this time to office, then you better be good at it. Because if you're doing shitty work all of your life, then what's the point of even being alive? Then you better do good work, and the way to define good work is you.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Meenal, you look nice. Meenal has changed. She's got a makeover.
Meenal got a haircut pretty early, pretty soon.
So we'll close this discussion here, and we're continuing this in an after party. So the link is shared right here. Yeah. So hoping to see you folks there, and thanks a lot for doing this. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for hosting us. Thank you.
That was amazing.
Bye.
Thanks, Rahul. Thanks, Arjun. Thanks, Fatema.
Yeah, thanks for
Bye-bye.
putting this together, guys. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.